So with that said, what would you say is the current state of men's mental health in the West? There's a lot of people always talk about mental health, but they tend to kind of forget the male perspective on it, right? Because men are taught to be stoic, hold it in, man up, etc. Which we advocate here on the channel, especially in front of a woman. But obviously, you should be able to open up and be able to deal with your problems with your brothers, or maybe with a professional that understands. But what would you say the state of men's mental health in the West today would be in general?
I think the state of men's mental health is pretty poor. I think the state of mental health of human beings and their physical health on this planet is pretty bad right now. Absolutely. I think that stoicism gets a bad rap. I remember when you came down yesterday and you broke the news to me about what was going on, I noticed and I mentioned that you seemed to be bearing up very well, and I appreciated your stoicism, and your eyes lit up. Like, there is definitely a time and a place to kind of bear your cross and to carry on. Absolutely. Yeah. And the powers that be that want to demonize that or say that that's a component of toxic masculinity, that's just not true, and that's not helpful for guys.
Yeah. So when they say men go to therapy, I just want your opinion on this. Does that actually work most of the time, or is it more like go deal with this and go over there, stay over there?
No, a lot of therapy doesn't work for guys, and that's, I think, partly why they're under consumers of therapy. Like, women go to therapists 3 to 4 times more often than men do. Right. They are by far the most significant consumers of psychotherapy. I have my own pet theory for why this is. So let me just ask you guys, what is your association with therapy? What do you think happens in a therapy session?
Well, I've never had a therapy session, but what I would assume is
even better. Like, what's your imagination about?
Yeah. So my imagination is you go in, you sit down, you lie on a couch like this, right? And you're just telling the therapist your problem, and you're just lying there, and they're doodling in the back. I'm just kidding, not doodling in the back, but you get out saying they're listening to it. They're like, okay, yes, all right, tell me more, etc. And it's almost, it depends on the therapist. Maybe they'll say, hey, this is a solution to it, or hey, let me refer you to a psychiatrist, maybe so you can get some medication, or they're trying to get you to come back for more sessions. I've always been under the idea, that therapy, it's not in their best interest to fix you up, because it's like, no, they want you to keep coming back.
Sure.
Yeah, so though I do definitely think it has its place, I don't know if it's a long-term solution to a long-term problem.
Okay, great. So that's a wonderful place to start. One of the things that I mentioned on my website is that therapy should be time limited. Like, sometimes you do have to take a knee, but you do eventually want to get back into the game. Like, I'm not looking for professional patients, people who just want to support my income. There is plenty of problems in the world needing solving. Let's have you in, patch you up, and send you on your way. So, but I hear you. There does seem to be an economic disincentive for therapists to cure their patients, because it's just one less client, right? Okay, your association is perfect classical psychoanalytic. The patient on the couch, the doctor with the notepad behind him, that's basically what Freud did. And psychoanalytic psychologists still do that today. And they don't really say that much. They just say, I see, tell me more. Oh. And
that's what Fresh does on dates.
That's what I do on dates, man.
Right on. Girls. You don't want to talk too much on a first date. Exactly. You don't disabuse a woman of her fantasy of you. That's why she's there.
W.
Absolutely. So, and a lot of guys say, okay, I'm just going to lie there. This guy's going to say, I see. And I'm going to pay him $200, $300. How is that going to help my problem?
What's the point? Yeah.
I get you. Now, why did this come to be? This is my pet theory. I'll be brief. So, Freud was a Jewish psychiatrist. He but not back in the day. Back in the day, because of the anti-Semitism in Europe, he couldn't get clients. No men would go to see him. So he basically had as his patients the people that the institution didn't want to work with, which was actually mostly women. And so most of Freud's clients, a lot of Freud's clients were women. And he was an entrepreneur. He was an experimenter. He was always trying new things. And he had this one patient, we know her as Anna O, and she kept coming for a while and didn't really help her all that much. And Freud was trying this, trying that, until one day she basically said, hey, listen, dude, just shut up. Just shut up and let me talk.
Wow.
And Freud was like, oh, okay, I can't see the harm of that. Maybe I'll try this. And so he just sat there quietly she talked for an hour, and at the end she said, I feel so much better now. And Freud was like, ding, 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 ding. And thus the talking cure was born. But this is a female or a feminine coping strategy. Women tend to feel better when they talk about certain things.
Yeah.
When they get it out, it's like the act of talking about it is cathartic for them.
Yeah.
Men are more problem solving. They don't understand how just talking and listening will help anyone because they see the problem as out there. Like, the problem is that I'm broke. The problem is that I have no prospects with women. The problem is I feel lonely.
Yeah.
Like, I need friends. I need to work. I need to get some game. I need something in the external world. Guys are more problem
solution typically to their problem versus with women, it's more, I just want to be able to speak and get my emotions out there, and that will make me feel a lot better versus for men. Exactly.
We call them problem solving versus emotional coping strategies, right?
Okay.
But here's the thing is that seemed to work for women, and Freud really ran with it. And that became kind of the basis of psychoanalytic and theory and psychotherapy for like 100 years afterwards.
Oh, wow.
There's still this association in 2023. The therapist just sits there and scribbles and says, I see. Thank you. See you next week. Right. But that came from a very specific time and a very specific place. And it seems to work for women. And it doesn't really seem to work for men.
Wow.
So, you know who comes to mind when you talk about therapy and men? FuzzyTube.
Yeah.
And I think he's a great creator.
Who?
FuzzyTube. He's like a YouTuber / like streamer now. He streams more on Kick, but like he's been in therapy for like a while. But I don't see a solution to his problems because what do they do in therapy for the most part? Just talk about issues and you know. So to me, it's kind of like, does it really work for men? Because I don't see it work for most men that go to therapy that I know.
Yeah.
Well, there's many different kinds of therapy. So I call what I do therapeutic coaching, which falls under the rubric of, let's say, cognitive behavioral therapy, which has a very strong behavioral component. My idea is that in order to feel better, you probably have to start doing something different.
Okay.
And so between every session, there's therapeutic assignments or behavioral experiments. The guy has to do something. The improvement is going to happen outside of the therapy office. And we'll see if that moved the ball a little further down the field. If not, we fiddle with the knobs and we keep going until the guy's flying on his own, and then we taper off.
Do other therapists take your more, because I would say that that's like a very practical and masculine way to help men solve what they might be going through. Do a lot of other psychologists and therapists apply that, that self-accountability to their patients or clients?
It's hard to know. I can't speak for all psychologists. I do know that there does seem to be sometimes I think therapy can kind of gaslight itself into thinking that it's more important than it really is.
Right.
Okay.
Like I gave the client a safe space to reflect on his or her emotional state and to express emotional support. Like that does have its time and a place, but that's generally not going to solve anybody's problem, in my opinion, long term.
Sorry. Yes.
So real quick. So if Be More Practical is going to help men in therapy, how about this? Like, what is the one solution you would say for men to do rather than go to therapy? Or do you still think therapy for some people is worth it? Like, for example, let's say to go to you versus somebody that's in the industry that wants to just take their money. What you do that's different, that makes you different from other people? Sure,
that's a great question. One thing I tell people is rule out the confounds. Like, try to take yourself as far as you can on your own before you enlist the help of a professional, because best case scenario, you don't need that professional at a certain point. So most people know in their heart of hearts the 2 or 3 things that they're doing that are really getting in their own way. And it's a better idea to stop doing the 2 or 3 things that are really getting in your way than develop like 10 new habits that are good, because the 2 or 3 things that are bad are probably more bad than the 10 good things are good.
Let's say I'm lazy and I like watching corn.
Okay.
Corn on YouTube. Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I think I understand.
Yeah.
So men have come to me for those reasons. Laziness is tough. Now, one thing that I might do if I was in a session with them is to begin to create some space. If you're a lazy person, then there's nothing I can do about it. It's like, you're just lazy. That's how you are. That's how you think about it. I can't change who you are intrinsically. But maybe sometimes you fall into lazy behavior patterns. Maybe you just let some things slide. Maybe you don't honor your commitments to yourself because you don't see that there's any consequences to doing that. So I create a bit of a distance between that self-attribution and who that person feels that he is. Because if you are lazy, you are dumb, what are you going to do to change that, right? But if you have lazy tendencies or you do things that get in your own way, those behaviors can be shifted.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
So I could think of, for example, let's say I need to go work on something, maybe a book, or maybe, for example, a business, but I play video games before I go work on that business. Playing the video games, I'm like, I'm kind of lazy now. So now I don't want to go work.
Sometimes that's part of the process. I remember when I first wanted to get good at pickup, for example, most men do not naturally feel confident enough to approach women in real life. And it was terrifying for me. I had this intention. I did some studies. I looked on YouTube. I read some books. And I really wanted to increase my optionality with women. So I got dressed up on a Saturday night and I went down to the local meat market and I talked to nobody. I just had like a drink by myself 1 hour, drink by myself second. And I left with my tail between my legs. And I went home and I felt like such a schmuck.
Yeah.
I felt ashamed of myself. I felt cowardly. I didn't like how I felt. But every Saturday I put that suit back on and I went out. And then every Saturday I came home feeling like a schmuck until that like 9th time in a row I went out. That 9th time in a row I went out and I was sitting there by myself and I could feel the same thing was about to happen again. And I saw this attractive woman from across the room and my mind said, okay, wait a minute, Orion. You know what's going to happen if you don't talk to this woman. You're going to, with 100% certainty, you're going to go home and you're going to feel like a schmuck. You're going to feel like a coward. That's painful. Whatever that woman could do to you is not as bad as what you're going to do to yourself if you don't do this.
Yeah.
And that was what changed the game for me. So it had to get worse before it gets better. So I've been there. I've played the video games before I sat down to work on the book. And I've done that enough times to know that when I do that, I feel like a schmuck. I don't feel proud of myself at the end of the day. I feel like I wasted a day of life. And we only get so many good days of our lives, man. We're here to get stuff done.
Yeah.
That's what life is all about.
So I'm hearing it's okay to fail, but at some point, that failure needs to turn into like, oh, you know what? I'm tired of this pain. I need to make a change.
Yes. And the problem why a lot of men don't get there is because they're failing and they're feeling the pain, but then they're anesthetizing themselves against that pain through corn or through drinking or through getting high.
Video games.
Or through video games.
Yeah.
Or
smoke weed every day.
Yeah.
Or sometimes even more adaptively, they just do it through like being hyper concerned about making money. Like they just become workaholics. Now that's more adaptive than some of these other things I mentioned, but it's still kind of a way of anesthetizing them against their own pain. And pain is your greatest teacher. Pain is the gift that nobody wants. Pain will motivate you to more than anything else. People are much more they'll do so much more to avoid pain than they will to secure pleasure.
Damn.
Wow. And a controversial take, I've talked about this, I talk about how my parents disciplined me when I was a kid growing up. If I did something stupid, I was slapped. And that negative reinforcement of pain would keep me from doing that undesirable behavior that my parents didn't want me to do. And it kept me straight line. And people are like, oh, you shouldn't be hitting kids. I mean, I think I turned out okay from it because pain, like you said before, is a pretty good reinforcement that what you're doing is wrong. And people try to avoid pain typically. So if you're trying to avoid pain, maybe you shouldn't, you should follow your parents' rules or at least not get caught. But
there's a time and a place. The line for child abuse is tissue damage.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'm not talking about beat. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to attack them. But like, they'd slap me or whatever when I was a kid. And I think I turned out okay from it.
Well, if a kid's about to run off into traffic and the mom pulls him back and she just says, good boys don't do that.
Yeah.
The importance of the message gets lost on the child. There has to be some emotional content in order for the child to understand that this is a very important lesson that needs to be learned. It needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
This isn't a game.
Yeah.